Welcome to Capes and Cartoons, where DC Comics and Saturday morning cartoons collide. My name is Brandon. Along with me on this journey, this adventure through Saturday morning cartoons and DC Comics, you know him as a storyteller on YouTube and TikTok. Please welcome to to this episodic podcast for us, Nick. Nick, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing good. When you first came to me with this, I was kind of hesitant, but when we started talking more about comics in this one, I was actually kind of excited for this. Little nervous, but excited.
You got me. I think it was the weirdest one because you did a video on Dynamite and Blue Falcon. I was like, we got to do this. Like, I want to do this with this guy. But what the purpose of us doing this is, fans, is we're about 10 years ago, DC Comics came out with crossovers with Hanna-Barbera and DC comic book characters. Now, they also did one with Looney Tunes, which we will get on to later on in the series. But for the focus here, we are going to start off with Hanna-Barbera and DC Comics, and we both came to a decision pretty quickly on which one we wanted to cover first, and that is Space Ghost and Green Lantern. Now, just to give you a little overview, it was written by James Tynion IV and Chris Sabella with art from Ariel Olavidi. Now, I want to talk about Ariel first, and I think you'll appreciate this because we've talked about this. He has drawn Space Ghost before in a comic book series that I totally spaced about until you reminded me of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, like his art is amazing in this. Like, truly gives you that Space Ghost vibe, just like it did in the what was it, 06-05 run of him time frame.
I think it was '05 Space Ghost.
Yeah.
Yep, '05 Space Ghost.
Now, what we have as our next section is called the Cartoon Check. This is where we kind of talk about what we remember about the specific cartoon character we're talking about today, which today is Space Ghost. I'm going to turn it over to Nick. Nick, how were you first introduced to Space Ghost?
Well, I don't remember much about the original cartoon, even when it was on Boomerang. I don't think I ever had the chance to ever watch it on there. But
Mm.
I do remember his parody series on Adult Swim, which was Space Ghost Coast to Coast, where he was a late night talk show host, and he had like a myriad of people. Like I think Weird Al Yankovic was on there. Conan O'Brien was on there. You had a whole bunch of people. Uh, who was it? Bill Nye the Science Guy. He
Yeah,
also
Bill.
had on there.
Yeah, Bill Nye.
Bill
I
Nye,
think.
yes.
Yeah, he had. Who else did he have? He had David Cross on there. He had quite a few
Yes.
people on there. It's he. See, I always loved watching like when it was just known as Cartoon Planet 2 before it became Coast to Coast. You know what? Preparing for this, and I think I told you, I was literally preparing by watching the old Space Ghost cartoon and watching Coast to Coast and and Cartoon Planet. And I remember the song, like, what was it? I think it was like, I almost love everybody. And he's like, and Zorak's sitting there like, set us free. He goes, haha, nice try. Not gonna happen. It's like, or the poo 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 platter. That was another one I think
Oh.
of.
But but going back to the original cartoon, I did like you, I was actually preparing to watch it, and I was actually looking to see if maybe the original cartoon gave us more about Space Ghost, because I don't think from what I watched, I don't think we really got too much of an origin with Space Ghost. I don't think they really delved deep into that.
No, I think like when you pitched us to read the original comic before we jumped into it, that was really the only time we ever got like an origin for him. You
Yeah.
get the background, and his origin's dark. It's not something that is, and I thought that was a good twist on the character. It's not just as I'm here to save the day. No, he's got a dark history. Like
Oh yeah.
it's not sunshine and roses for this guy. It's just like I look at that now, and when I try to rewatch it, I could never look at him the same. I remember I was a kid, and I remember learning about Space Ghost, and I was through Coast to Coast, and then I started watching the cartoons on Boomerang. I didn't get into them as much as I should have, but I always remember Zorak and Brack. to the biggest villains of his, and just to kind of see how it is now and going back through it. It's fun to go through nostalgic feelings and understand, like, hey, this is the reason I love this character. And I feel like with this one, I was glad when we talked about doing this first, because Space Ghost is a character I feel can be considered underrated. It is
Oh
not a
yeah.
character people tend to think about, especially for Hanna-Barbera. It's not a character you
Mhm.
always think about. But that's all I have for the cartoon check. Now, what we're going to be getting into, guys, is next we're going to be going over kind of also the history and context of these characters. So we kind of split up here. So Nick's going to be giving you guys the history of Space Ghost. I'm going to be giving you the history of the Green Lantern Corps, or member that we're going to be talking about today, Hal Jordan. But I'll turn it over to Nick to start us off.
All right. Well, Space Ghost, as before, was created by Hanna-Barbera, but it was designed by Alex Toth. The character design was. The idea for Space Ghost was actually to have more of a intergalactic crime fighter that's very similar to Batman. Which I'm pretty sure I sent you the meme where it's like Space Ghost gets a haircut because he has the Batman horn. Um, but like I said before, in the show, there wasn't really too much of his origins ever explained. We didn't really get to see what his real name was, what he did beforehand, or anything. Then again, like you said before, until the 2005 series came out, written by Joe Kelly, they are done by Ariel Olivier and Jamie Tyrion.
Mhm,
That's when we actually get a full, like, origin story for this character, and like you said, it's dark, it's not happy, even though it kinda starts off like that, it kinda goes sideways, like, very quickly, you know? But his real name in the origin comic was Thaddeus Bach, and he was a peacekeeper that, was working very similar to, like, how the Green Lantern Corps was. They were not only defending the planet that they lived on, but went out to other, nearby planets to protect them if something happened, dictators, warlords, things like that in space.
mhm,
Not only that, he actually had a wife and a son that was on the way. Not only that, he was getting a promotion in the peacekeeping corps that would allow him to join the Eldion Elite. Now, essentially, the Eldion Elite is basically like what you would consider the Black Ops version of Earth.
mhm,
But Thaddeus finds out that they're a very much corrupted part of the Peace Corps. During one mission, they found out that he found out that they were embezzling money from their operations and kind of taking it for themselves, not really giving it to the Peacekeeping Corps. And
mhm.
so they didn't like that. And so they thought, well, if he's not going to join us with what we're doing, well, we're going to take him out the picture. And this is when it goes left right away. They capture him, his wife, and they, as I will not go into detail, do things to his wife that we will never see her again in the comics. And so after kind of leaving him on a dead planet, he does somehow survive with an alien known as Solomon. And after Thaddeus gets back up to health, and he arms himself with high-end tech gear, and he essentially goes after the Eldion Elite and gets his revenge. Well, he almost gets his entire revenge, except he kind of goes back to what Batman is, which is someone that fights for justice. And so he brings the Eldion leader back to the Peace Corps for justice, not for revenge.
It's not who it's what I do that defines me. Uh, I remember when you told me this, and going back and rereading it, I know we kind of talked about it, he's kind of a jerk. He truly is
Yeah.
after everything that's happened. Like, what was it? This is where we kind of get I can't remember their names right off the top of my head, but the two kids that work with him, and kind
I
of get
think
their
one of their name was Jan,
yeah,
and I think it was Jace, I think. Jan
yes,
and Jace.
Jason, yeah. And they were such jerks. He was such a jerk to the 2 kids. I wanted to sit there and hit him through the page. I was like, "Man, how can you do this? They're just 2 kids." And then he sits there, and I thought he was gonna be a jerk to him after he found out their parents were gone too, and it's like, how? Like, how can you do this to him?" And then he goes, "Oh, yeah, I'm gonna take you in. We're gonna be" it's kinda like a Batman it is a Batman situation.
Yeah.
You're gonna come with
I
me.
will say without the monkey, It's a lot better.
What are you talking about? The monkey's Ace the Bat Hound for him. Come on now.
I know, but it's just like, those old cartoons where it's like the main hero, the two or one sidekick, and then they're unconventionally somehow solving the problem like animal friend.
There you go. Now we'll go into the history of Green Lantern, Hal Jordan, who first appeared in Showcase number 22 in October 1959. It was DC's push toward more of a sci-fi space-focused hero. Hal was introduced as a fearless test pilot who often took risks, and his life changed when a dying alien by the name of Abin Sur, a member of the Green Lantern Corps, crash landed on Earth and used his power ring to seek out a replacement who was capable of overcoming great fear. Now, Hal was the one chosen, but let's not forget there was a little retcon that he was not the only one that was picked, but he was chosen because he was closer to the crash site. And that is our boy, the man who, when they don't have nothing to do with them, they put him in a coma, Guy Gardner. And you imagine if Guy was the Green Lantern for this comic? This would have been
Oh,
insane. Like, I think some of their banter would have been funnier, like, just to see the two of them being old school and new
yeah.
school, but I'm kinda glad they went with the Hal choice. Um, but yeah, we can't not deny Guy Gardner was one of them that was first looked at. Now, if anybody does not know what a Green Lantern ring is, how dare you? No, I'm just messing. It works by channeling the wearer's willpower, transforming their thoughts and imagination into tangible green energy constructs. It can also make them allow them to fly, create force fields, energy blasts, and they're also universal translators. And of course, the Green Lantern Corps is an intergalactic police force dedicated to protecting sentient life in every form, created by the Guardians, who are some of the most emotionless and hypocritical people you will ever meet in the DC universe. But they have set strict rules for all Green Lanterns to follow, which Hal does struggle to follow. And early in his career, this is kind of where I love to say this is the Count Dooku Qui-Gon Jinn moment for Green Lantern Corps, because Hal was trained and mentored by Sinestro, who was once considered one of the greatest Green Lanterns before becoming their greatest enemy. And Sinestro's influence on Hal is important because it shapes how Hal views authority and discipline and what happens when power is taken too far. And of course, Hal has had several roles through the DC universe, including being a member of the Justice League of America in Europe. He has sported other colored rings, including the blue, yellow, red, and white lantern rings. He was also known as a villain by the name of Parallax, which that is my favorite version of Hal. I don't care. Hal is a villain to me. I love him because it's not even a villain, he's just a broken character at that point, and it makes it for interesting storytelling. And he was once considered the Spectre, and the purpose was so the Spectre could redeem Hal after his time being Parallax, is the reason why the Spectre chose him. Yeah, Hal is not one of my favorite Green Lanterns. It is John for me, but I always loved Hal as Parallax. I would have loved to seen even Parallax and Space Ghost go at it for some reason. I think that would have been so fun to watch the two of them
That
fight.
would have been a great battle.
Now, what we're going to be going into next, of course, is the overview, the main meat of our thing. What we liked, what we disliked about the comic, kind of go into the comic itself. Nick, let's start with you. What were some of the points that you truly enjoyed about this comic?
Well, one is the introduction of Space Ghost, how he was beating Larfleeze, especially since, he doesn't really have that many powers. Even when you think about it, most of his stuff is just technology based. And after, when you take all of his technology away, he's just a regular, human like alien. So
Mhm.
him beating a lantern, or at least someone that had a power ring at all with just the technology he has, says a lot about the technology that he uses.
Yeah.
I talked about this one, the size difference between him and Hal. I like how Hal and Thaddeus both act around with kids. In the comic, we see that there was a native alien species on the planet that they were on, and they were both kind to her, very much out of character. Well, for me, because I never really see how Jordan ever act like around kids, but most of the time when I do, it's more like he's like, like, keep away from me. kind of a thing. But again, I don't really read too much Green Lantern kind of stuff, but it also kind of shows how much Thaddeus has also changed from the original comic, because I'm assuming this does take place in his origins with DC.
Mhm,
So him acting a lot more nicer, a lot more gentle with this child speaks volumes of how much he has changed from that origin to now. I love the heart-touching ending of the story. I think that was pretty good.
mhm.
And that's all from my life. So I'll hand it back over to you, DC.
I agree. I think this was a great little kinda thing to do with old school versus new school when you really think about it. Thaddeus is more old school. He's more tell it as it is, do all this, right? Where Green Lantern's going, well, I'm gonna risk things a little bit. Like having those moments like between them where their ideologies clash a lot is great. Space Ghost's introduction in this was phenomenal. Like when you just see the eyes and just see a blast come across and he goes, enjoy your concussion to Larfleeze, like it was like, that was fun, but then you see the transition from his invisible form, and it was just great artwork from beginning to end. And I also love that whole beginning fight where you have Larfleeze and the Decarians kinda showing the lore from both sides, and having that moment where it's not just a Space Ghost villain too, there's also a Green Lantern villain involved, depending on how you wanna look at Larfleeze, and some people look at him as a villain, some don't, but fights were great. I loved the one in the forest because it showcases it's not just technology, he's also very strong, and
Yeah.
had that moment where he's ripping trees, and of course, what was it? Green Lantern goes like, "What was it? There's no wildfires here for you guys or something," and he goes, "Let me play fair here," you know? I love how they both thought they were the weapon that was being called into place. Um, Having that moment where they both thought they were the weapon they were going after, and then they realize, "Oh, we're both space cops." Essentially, like and then having that moment with, "Well, guess we're both cops. Who's going in to be the good cop and who's gonna be the bad cop?" He goes, "I'm always the good cop." Like, it's just that moment, like, I was sitting there laughing, but Keela was one of my shining parts of the story. Being this little girl who doesn't like the violence, but I also love the optimism from her. She's so confident on the surface, but deeply afraid of what exists beyond their world. And I feel like having that moment with Space Ghost and Green Lantern, I always love that. Like, I love the scene, like you said, the size shows, like when they're kneeing down. I was waiting for him to like put him in a chokehold there at that point, like, "Hey, buddy, old pal, like, hey, let's be friends so we can get our weapons back," you know? And it's like, and Hal goes, "Ow," and he goes, "Oh yeah." Th That moment was great, but I love Uncle Maven with her too. I thought that was a great little story because, like, you find out that he's one of them that believes there's more in their world, where that world is so cut off from that and only is told what to believe in life, and I've always loved that, and I also love the scene, and I know we haven't really talked about it, is when they use each other's weapons, like how I have to mention one more part when Green Lantern enters the world for the first time, and he goes, "Think of something scary to fend them off," and he thinks, "What's
Oh.
the scariest thing you can think of?" And he makes a construct of Batman of all people, and they all run away. That scene gets me. I started laughing when I saw that. I was like, "Oh my, like, this is awesome." And then when Space Ghost gets the lantern ring and he goes, "Okay, defend us, defend us, defend us," and he sits there and he makes this barrier and he goes, "How did I do?" And Hal's like, "Well, you blocked in all of us, but we're gonna find a way to make this work," you know? And then his was just like, "Oh, this is easy, just press a button and, beam," and he gets blown back so far, like, just during that blast. But it shows you again their ideologies. You have old school who doesn't know newer technology to new school who thinks they know everything, and
Yes.
but that moment where they recharge and amplify their blast, oh, that was such a great moment because it was like
That was fantastic.
my favorite part of that Space Ghost goes, "I learned this from Blip," and he goes, "Who the hell is Blip?" It's like but or I think he says, "What the hell is a blip?" Like, but the ending scene with, Keela, like, with the whole, like, "You better have my honorary space badge, you better have this like you promised me." That was such a great moment because you see how much they affected their life in that matter of just a little bit of time, and to see and showcase what there is beyond the stars or what's beyond their skies is more than what they see. There's only one dislike I did not like about the comic is I wish we wouldn't gotten more why they sent Hal out per se compared to
Mhm.
sending somebody else out. I know that's a small nitpick, but that was something I felt like it lacked because if it's outside your boundaries of this universe, I don't think Green Lanterns have ever done so I felt like they kind of lacked a little bit there, but it was like I get it. It's supposed to be a crossover. We're not supposed to ask questions like that. But like, were there any dislikes on your end?
Well, I actually got a few more with
Mhm.
my dislikes. So one thing that I kind of wished happened a little more was the fight between Hal and Space Ghost. I feel like that could have been a little bit longer.
Yeah.
We could have maybe kind of got a little bit hand to hand combat. To kind of show like how different these two are from how Thaddeus. Training from a peacekeeper and how he was able to take on like four, maybe five like different aliens at one time versus how Hal's training from him being an airman. And, I also kind of felt like they kinda got along a little too quickly, like you said, it's a one shot, no, we're not supposed to ask these questions, it's supposed to be fun, kinda get the message of what it wants, pretty quickly,
Mhm.
and I didn't really feel like that they didn't ask each other so much about one another, because it would've been great to kinda see, like, how Space Ghost would have told how his story was and how Hal would have told his story of how he became a lantern and, again, how Space Ghost became Space Ghost. I think that would have been pretty good because it would have been funny to see Hal be like, man, I should introduce you to my buddy Batman.
You imagine if that was the Green Lantern from, Injustice? "Hey, our
Oh,
our regime leader just went through the same thing. You might wanna be This is who you could have became, but I'm glad you didn't." kinda thing. But
oh, that's so
or
good.
I that's why I said there wasn't a lot of nitpicking for me, like, it was actually I agree with the fight, I think I would've loved to had more in the space fight compared to seeing
Uh-huh.
him on ground, just because that's where they're based off of. They're out of space, like, to have that moment, I just felt like it lacked until we get to the forest where we saw more of them fighting. But I love how they were like, "Oh, stop fight" or was it Keyless like, "Stop fighting, and here comes a stump on" on, the Space Ghost. That scene got me a lot because I was like it's kinda like one of those kids like, "Stop it," and it's like, like one more hit at the end. But that's why I said, like, just like I agree with you, though. I wish we would have gotten more from the space fight per se. Like, because the space fight to me was ruined with Larfleeze and the dirt or Ducarians. I do feel like we should have gotten more with Space Ghost and Green Lantern, but I will admit having a fly swatter come out against the Ducarians was a great choice. But I would have loved that moment too, I think, where, he goes, "I wanna get one of those rings." I wished Hal would have said, "That's not how it works." Like, but let's go into our next part. We're getting close to the end of this first podcast episode called the Saturday Morning Test. Now, what we do with this is we talk about can we see this as a cartoon episode that we would watch on a Saturday morning cartoon, or should it just stay to a comic? And also talk about what it was targeted towards. Was it targeted more to kids or was it targeted more towards adults? Let's go into the comic or cartoon. Should this be a cartoon or should this be a comic?
Honestly, I can definitely see this be like a cartoon, honestly. It brings back not only an old character from Hanna-Barbera, but it also lets newer audience kind of see like how Jordan works. I know we did have that cartoon series with Hal Jordan, the Green Lantern one back in like
Oh,
what was
nine.
it like 2010,
Yeah.
09? Yeah. And it would have been great to kind of have like people see more of Hal Jordan and how would Hal Jordan act like when he's with another hero out from, from different space. And, not only that, it would also show the audience, like, an old character like Space Ghost and how he works, and, we would also get Jan and Jace. Um, Also their pet.
Blip. I
What's a
want
blip?
it with a blip. You imagine if Hal said straight up, "I have a pet too, his name's Kilowog." Like, she should beat him.
And another thing would be actually for Space Ghost to go to the Green Lantern Corps and for them to be like, "Yo, we've heard of you, Space Ghost, but it's you've been evading us for such a while," or something like that, where they could have done something, but they couldn't really because of X, Y, and Z.
That's why I said I agree. I think this should be a cartoon. I think this would make a great, you know how they used to have like the split, especially for something like Space Ghost, where it was like the first half was Space Ghost, second half was this. You imagine they had like a little power half hour thing, like where it was just like they split off, and then every so often you would have them collide a lot. I could see them like this. Like I feel like this would be great. Like I feel like when we get to our next segment or next part of our little episode here, I know I'm gonna pitch somebody that I wish we would have seen in this comic more than somebody else.
Uh-huh.
But and we'll get to that here in a second. But yeah, this would have been perfect for a cartoon. Like I love the comic. I think the comic was a great idea. Do I want more? Yeah, I think everybody does because we want that follow up now. Like it leads on such a good cliffhanger that's kind of like you want more from it. You want to see if she can find Green Lantern and Space Ghost. You want to see if they can reunite. I think they left that open for purposely. I think if this was a success, it would have brought back this concept, and I think it would have been a great concept for them. Do I want somebody else though? Yeah, and I'll pitch for who I had for this. But now, was this more targeted towards kids or adults in this? Is the next question.
Ooh, I think it's a bit of both, honestly. Not
Mhm.
only for adults that had that nostalgic feeling for Space Ghost, but the one thing that I just realized when we're now talking about this is that it kind of shows how much a hero can actually affect the youth. Like how I forgot her name. I think you had her
Keela.
name before.
Keela.
Kayla, yes.
Yeah.
Keela.
Yep.
Okay. How they affected her and how, they kind of inspired her to go out into more space to be, essentially a space cop.
Yeah.
And how much like even that short time that they were there, that short time they were telling her about space and everything, that changed her entire world for her to not only continue to learn about space but to also build her own spaceship to go out into space, you know?
And that's a good way to put it because, like we said, we talked about Keela there a little bit too. Is that how she's confident on the surface that everything she's been taught is real, but there's that slight hope of optimism, but it's also scare like pretty much like fear of what exists beyond that realm, you know? But then you see how when Maven does go or does pass, like now she believes in what her uncle Maven was believing in and what he was researching. You know, all this all comes to play, and it's because, like you said, it's Space Ghost and Green Lantern. Without them, they wouldn't see that. It would be a society still stuck underneath what and not wanting to explore what's beyond the stars. You know, it's a great point to bring up. I do feel it was more targeted towards adults, knowing now, like they did, like we talked about, did bring some of the concepts from the comic from '05 to this a little bit. I do feel like you could not make this a cartoon and not have that at least I wouldn't go TV 14, but maybe Y7, things like that. I do feel like it would not be one for young kids to watch. But let's go into our next segment where we call the cartoon shakeup. This is where we talk about if we could switch the characters in this particular comic, who would it be and why, and who would we change it to? Um, Nick, if you would you have changed any of these two options, or would you have kept it the same?
Honestly, I think if I did read up on Adam Strange more, I would have loved an Adam Strange and Space Ghost because it does kind of seem like those two would be a match made in heaven for each other.
Mhm.
But I think keeping it with the two space cops essentially would be it's just perfect. Honestly, I can't really think of anything to change it.
The I would have kept after rereading it again, I read it a couple times to get it, and I was like, "Okay," and not to get it, I understood what happened, but I was wanting to like, "Okay, would I have changed it?" I wouldn't have changed Space Ghost. I would have changed Hal Jordan, though. I would have changed him to John Stewart, and the reason I say
Oh,
that because they're both I feel like it would have haven't been like cocky versus non-cocky kind of thing. It would have been old school versus new school, but it also brings a different type of relationship into it as well. They're both military people. They're both, and Hal's military too. I'm not saying it like that, but John brings that aspect where I think if they would have had a hand to hand combat fight, it would be one that I feel would be watched. Like it's not something I would have seen. Would I've changed part of the story? Yes, and here's the reason why. I would have loved to seen Atrocitus as one of the main villains. Ha
Yes.
You imagine if, say, somebody like Space Ghost got a Red Lantern ring because of his grief of what happened? You
Oh, that'd be
know,
scary.
that would be one scary mofo, like, I will put it out there now, like, that's what I was thinking, like, instead of Larfleeze, that would have been perfect for somebody like Atrocitus, having that moment because I wouldn't see, that's where I always argue with people. Atrocitus isn't truly a bad person. Is he's been wronged in his life by the Guardians. That's why we say hypocritical because they are very hypocritical in the comics. But having that moment with Atrocitus instead of Larfleeze, I think would have built a better dramatic story for them, and I think it would have been made better storytelling for them. Now, we go into our last part, which of course is our rankings. Now, how are we ranking this? We're talking about superheroes and Saturday morning comics. So we're going to rank it off bowls of cereal. Okay. And if we're going for seconds, if it's that high, on a scale of 1 to 10 first, before we go into seconds, where you rank this and your bowls of cereals? How many bowls of cereals are you eating with this?
I gotta say 6. I gotta say 6. It would be fantastic. I would highly reread this over and over again.
Okay. I had mine a little higher. I went to 8 at bowls. I'm a chubby guy. I gotta eat my cereal, but that is one that's gonna keep me. You're like, what's going on? What's going on? I go for seconds on this. I think it's a great comic. I think this, like we said, it explores that option of they could make a second one to this. There could be another crossover between these two. And they set it up so perfectly. And why Space Ghost is not part of the DC universe, I will still never understand. That is a character that's easily ploppable. That and Birdman too, I'd put in there. Like those two are just easily plopped into DC universe time frame. Like when you really
Yeah,
think about it,
let's switch out Hawkman and put in Birdman. We'll
God,
get a
yeah.
better
Well,
story.
he'd probably be better. He's got solar power. It's not just him carrying around a mace and getting dried up by Hawkman. Becoming a dry chicken wing is what he became.
Yeah.
Um, Shout out to our live, the comics and wings. But just the point, like, God, do you imagine Hawkman? I'm here too. Get out! Oh, it flies off.
Sorry, Hawkman. We already kind of have a bird guy here, so
You
we don't really need another one.
But that's what I said. It's such a great comic. It truly is. When we talked about doing this, I forgot all about these and rereading some of them. Like, man, these were great concepts. Some are weird, but some are great concepts. Now, next one we will be covering, so you guys will know, is going to be, I believe we said we were doing Adam Strange and Johnny Quest, which was kind of going from space to start getting grounded a little bit. I think this is a great way to head out. And fans, we want to hear your opinions. Have you read this comic? Do you feel this would make for a great Saturday morning comic or cartoon, or should it just stay a comic? What do you like and dislike about the Green Lantern Corps, and what do you love about Space Ghosts? We want to hear that in the comments. So always, I want to thank Storyteller for joining me on this podcast. Tell the fans where they can find you.
Well, you guys can find me on TikTok. You guys can find me on YouTube by the same name, The Storyteller. I'm currently right now working on my Iron Fist run, so I'm working. I think I got a couple more issues with Iron Fist, the Living Weapon. As soon as the Deadly Hands of Kunlun comes out, I'm going to be reviewing that instantly. If there's any other movies, comics, or anything you guys want me to learn, read about, give my opinions on, review, y'all just hit me up in these comments or hit me up on my stuff. Or just send me a direct message on TikTok. I'm always on TikTok reading everybody's messages because I got nothing better to do for most of my days.
Let's get him to do a Batmite video for us fans. We want to see a Batmite video. We want to see him and Gonzo and Mr. Mitspitalik go on an adventure. Come on
Oh,
now. As always, fans, check us out. You can find this podcast here on DC Comic Talker. Check us out, or check out the DC Comic Talker out on Instagram, TikTok. If you like this content, you want more of it, remember to subscribe, hit that like button, and hit the bell notification so that you never miss our pretty faces. Remember to always grab your bowl of cereal and enjoy your Saturday morning cartoons.